Welcome to Light Over Heat with Professor David Yamane. Let's talk about the changing face of American gun owners today. For many people, especially those who don't have a lot of direct contact with American gun owners, the primary face of gun ownership today are Oath Keepers marching in formation up to the U.S. Capitol, or Kyle Rittenhouse walking the streets of Kenosha, Wisconsin with a rifle, or even the good old boys from TV's Duck Dynasty. But in my experience and research, the primary face of American gun culture looks somewhat different. And so I'm fortunate to have a couple of national surveys of gun owners that highlight some of the more diverse aspects of American gun ownership that seem to get less attention. First is a 2021 National Firearms Survey fielded by William English, a professor in the business school at Georgetown, who I've never met before, but if all goes well, I'll be having lunch with him this week and learn more about his project through that. But he surveyed in an opt-in design 54,000 American adults and found that 16,708 of them identified as gun owners. Now, we know from last week that that's probably an underestimate of the actual rate of gun ownership, but even as an underestimate, that's a significant number of people. And if we look at the racial composition of gun ownership, we do see a much more diverse face than we see if we just watch television. So 34% of whites own guns, but so do 28% of Hispanics. Over a quarter of Hispanics own guns, as do a quarter of blacks in America, and even nearly 1 in 5 or 20% of Asians own guns. Those are not insignificant numbers, and they are important if we're to correctly understand American gun culture today. Now, if we want to understand the changing face of American gun ownership and the future of American gun ownership, we want to look more closely at new gun owners. And so we have a 2021 National Firearms Survey fielded by scholars at Northeastern and Harvard universities. They've published a paper that looks at patterns of new gun buying from 2019 until the spring of 2021. And what do they find about people who bought guns from the beginning of 2019 through April of 2021? They find considerable diversity among these new gun buyers. So almost half of new gun buyers in that time period were female, 21% were black, and 19% Hispanic. So 1 in 5 new gun buyers in that time period were black or Hispanic. 35% come from urban areas. And very importantly, 61% are handgun-only buyers. Now, owning only a handgun tends to signal that the people who are buying these guns are primarily interested in self-defense, which makes sense because the core of American gun culture today, as I've argued, is what I call, following Michael Bain, gun culture 2.0. And since I mentioned gun culture 2.0 here, I'm going to talk a little bit more in depth about what gun culture 2.0 is next week, so stay tuned for that.